Picture this. You're sitting in a crowded room, your heart starts racing, your palms get sweaty, and suddenly you feel like everyone can see right through you, like they all know you don't belong there. Or maybe you're lying in bed at 3 in the morning, your mind spinning with all the things that could go wrong tomorrow, next week, next year. Your chest feels tight, your breathing gets shallow, and you wonder if this is just how life is supposed to feel, like walking on a tightrope over an endless pit of worry. Sound familiar? Here's something that might surprise you. Right now, in this very moment, you have everything you need to completely transform that experience. Not tomorrow, not after years of therapy, not after reading 50 self-help books. Right now. And I'm going to show you exactly how, using wisdom that's been helping people find peace for over 2,500 years, combined with what modern science tells us about the anxious mind. You know, there's this beautiful teaching in Buddhist philosophy about a farmer who loses his horse. His neighbors come to him and say, "Oh, what terrible luck!" And the farmer simply responds, "Maybe." The next day, the horse returns with 3 wild horses. The neighbors exclaim, "What wonderful fortune!" Again, the farmer says, "Maybe." His son tries to tame one of the wild horses and breaks his leg. "What a disaster," say the neighbors. "Maybe," replies the farmer. Then war breaks out, and because of his broken leg, the son is spared from being drafted. "How lucky," cry the neighbors, and once again the farmer simply says, "Maybe." This story isn't just about perspective, though that's part of it. It's about something much deeper that directly relates to anxiety. It's about the fact that our minds are constantly creating stories about what things mean, about what's good or bad, about what we should fear or celebrate. And anxiety. Anxiety is what happens when we get completely lost in the story our mind is telling us about the future, especially the scary parts of that story. But here's the beautiful thing. You are not your thoughts. You are not your anxiety. You are the awareness that observes these thoughts and feelings, and that awareness has the power to choose how to respond. Let me share something with you that changed everything for me. A few years ago, I was sitting in a meditation retreat, surrounded by complete silence, when suddenly anxiety hit me like a wave. My mind started racing with all the reasons I shouldn't be there, all the things I should be doing instead, all the ways I was probably doing meditation wrong. But instead of fighting these thoughts or trying to push them away, I remembered something the teacher had said: "Whatever arises, meet it with curiosity and kindness." So I got curious about my anxiety. I noticed how it felt in my body, the tightness in my chest, the flutter in my stomach, the way my shoulders hunched up toward my ears. I noticed the thoughts that came with it, rapid, repetitive, always starting with, "What if?" And then I did something revolutionary. I thanked my anxiety. I literally said silently to myself, "Thank you, anxiety. I see that you're trying to protect me. I appreciate your concern." And something amazing happened. The anxiety didn't disappear, but it softened. It became less urgent, less overwhelming. It was still there, but it wasn't in control anymore. This is the essence of mindful awareness when it comes to anxiety, and it's the foundation of everything else we're going to explore together today. In Buddhism, there's a concept called the second arrow. The first arrow is the initial experience. Maybe it's anxiety, maybe it's fear, maybe it's sadness. We can't always control when that first arrow hits us, but the second arrow is our reaction to that first arrow. The judgment, the resistance, the story we tell ourselves about why we shouldn't be feeling what we're feeling. And here's the thing. We shoot that second arrow at ourselves every single time. When anxiety arises, the first arrow might be that uncomfortable feeling in your chest, those worried thoughts. But the second arrow is when you tell yourself, "I shouldn't be anxious about this. I'm being ridiculous. I should be stronger. Everyone else has it figured out except me." That second arrow often causes more suffering than the original anxiety ever could. So let's start with the first mindful technique, and I call it the RAIN method, which comes directly from Buddhist meditation practices. RAIN stands for recognize, allow, investigate, and non-attachment. When you notice anxiety beginning to arise, you're first going to recognize it. Not judge it, not try to fix it, just recognize it. "Oh, I notice anxiety is here." It's like greeting an old friend who shows up at your door unexpectedly. You don't have to invite them in for dinner, but you can acknowledge their presence. Then you're going to allow it to be there. This is where most of us get stuck because our instinct is to fight anxiety, to push it away, to distract ourselves from it. But fighting anxiety is like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. It takes enormous energy, and eventually it's going to pop back up with even more force. Allowing doesn't mean you like anxiety or want it there. It just means you stop wasting energy fighting against what's already happening. Next, you're going to investigate the anxiety with kindness. Get curious about it. Where do you feel it in your body? What does it actually feel like? Often, when we really examine anxiety closely, we discover it's not as solid or overwhelming as we thought. It might feel like a flutter or a tightness or a buzzing sensation. It has texture and movement. It's not this massive, unchangeable thing. It's actually quite dynamic and workable. Finally, non-attachment. This doesn't mean you don't care. It means you remember that you are not your anxiety. Anxiety is something you're experiencing, but it's not who you are. It's like weather passing through the sky of your awareness. You can notice the storm clouds without becoming the storm. You can observe the lightning without becoming electricity. This perspective completely changes your relationship with anxiety because you realize you have a choice in how you respond to it. The second technique I want to share with you comes from the practice of loving kindness meditation, and it's incredibly powerful for anxiety because anxiety often comes with a lot of harsh self-judgment. It's called the inner friend practice. When anxiety arises, instead of becoming your own worst critic, you're going to become your own best friend. You're going to speak to yourself the way you would speak to someone you love who was struggling with the same thing. Here's how it works. When you notice anxiety, place your hand on your heart and say to yourself, either silently or out loud, "This is a moment of anxiety. Anxiety is part of being human. May I be kind to myself in this moment." It sounds simple, almost too simple, but there's profound wisdom in this practice. You're acknowledging the reality of what you're experiencing without judgment. You're connecting yourself to the shared human experience of difficulty, and you're offering yourself the same compassion you would offer a good friend. In Buddhist teaching, there's this understanding that suffering comes not just from difficult experiences, but from our resistance to those experiences. There's even a formula for it. Suffering equals pain times resistance. When we resist our anxiety, when we judge ourselves for having it, when we try to force it away, we multiply our suffering. But when we meet anxiety with acceptance and kindness, we reduce our resistance and therefore reduce our suffering. The third technique is called mindful breathing, but it's different from the breathing exercises you might have tried before. This isn't about breathing in a special way or trying to control your breath. It's about using your breath as an anchor for your awareness. In Zen Buddhism, they say that the breath is the bridge between the body and the mind, between the conscious and the unconscious, between what we can control and what we can't. Here's the practice. When anxiety arises, you're going to bring your attention to your breath wherever you feel it most clearly. Maybe that's at your nostrils, maybe it's in your chest, maybe it's in your belly. You're not trying to change your breath. You're just noticing it. When your mind gets caught up in anxious thoughts, and it will, you gently, without judgment, bring your attention back to your breath. Think of your breath as a kind friend who's always there for you, always reliable, always in the present moment. What makes this practice so powerful for anxiety is that anxiety lives in the future. It's all about what might happen, what could go wrong, what we need to prepare for or worry about. But your breath only exists in the present moment. When you anchor your awareness in your breath, you anchor yourself in the now, and anxiety can't survive in the present moment. Not the real present moment anyway. There's a beautiful Buddhist story about a monk who was walking through a forest when he encountered a tiger. The tiger chased him to the edge of a cliff, and as he was hanging from a vine over the precipice, he noticed a strawberry growing nearby. He picked it and ate it, and it was the most delicious strawberry he had ever tasted. This story teaches us that even in the midst of danger, even when anxiety is chasing us like a tiger, we can still find moments of beauty and presence. Your breath is like that strawberry. It's always available to you, no matter what's happening around you or inside your mind. The fourth technique is called the body scan of impermanence, and it's based on one of the fundamental insights of Buddhist philosophy. Everything changes. Everything is temporary. This includes your anxiety. When we're in the grip of anxiety, it feels permanent, like it will never end, like this is just how we are. But the truth is, everything in your experience is constantly changing, including difficult emotions. Here's how the practice works. When anxiety arises, you're going to do a slow, mindful scan of your body, starting from the top of your head and moving down to your toes. As you scan each part of your body, you're going to notice what's actually happening there. Is there tension, relaxation, warmth, coolness, tingling, numbness? You're not trying to change anything, you're just noticing. And as you notice, you're going to remind yourself, this sensation is here now, and now it's changing. This feeling is temporary. This too shall pass. What you'll discover when you practice this regularly is that your body is never static. Even when anxiety feels overwhelming and permanent, your actual physical experience is constantly shifting and changing. The tight chest loosens for a moment. The rapid heartbeat slows down occasionally. The tense shoulders soften briefly. When you train yourself to notice these micro-changes, you start to see that anxiety is not this solid, unchangeable wall. It's more like a river, always moving, always flowing, never the same from moment to moment. The fifth technique comes from the Tibetan Buddhist practice of Tonglen, which means taking and giving. This might be the most counterintuitive anxiety practice you'll ever encounter, because instead of trying to get rid of your anxiety, you're actually going to breathe it in and transform it. In traditional Tonglen practice, when you encounter suffering, either your own or someone else's, you breathe in that suffering with compassion and breathe out relief and peace. Here's how to adapt this for anxiety. When you're feeling anxious, instead of trying to push the feeling away, you're going to breathe it in fully. As you inhale, imagine breathing in not just your own anxiety, but the anxiety of everyone who has ever felt this way. You're taking on the universal human experience of worry and fear. Then, as you exhale, you're breathing out peace, calm, and relief, not just for yourself but for everyone who struggles with anxiety. This practice might sound scary at first. Why would you want to breathe in more anxiety? But here's what happens. When you stop resisting anxiety and actually welcome it with compassion, it loses its power over you. When you connect your personal struggle with the universal human experience of anxiety, you realize you're not alone, you're not broken, and you're not the only one who feels this way. There's something deeply healing about knowing that your struggle is part of the shared human condition. The sixth technique is called noting, and it comes from Vipassana meditation. The basic idea is that when thoughts or feelings arise, instead of getting caught up in the content of those thoughts, you simply note what kind of mental activity is happening, and then gently return your attention to the present moment. For anxiety, this might sound like worrying, or planning, or fearing. The key to noting is that you're not judging these mental activities or trying to stop them. You're simply recognizing them for what they are, temporary mental events that arise and pass away. It's like being a scientist studying your own mind. You're not trying to change the results of the experiment. You're just observing what's actually happening with curiosity and objectivity. When you practice noting with anxiety, you start to see patterns. You might notice that your anxious thoughts tend to follow certain themes. Maybe you always worry about health, or relationships, or work. You might notice that anxiety often arises at certain times of day, or in certain situations. This awareness is incredibly valuable because it helps you see that anxiety isn't random or uncontrollable. It has patterns and triggers, which means it's workable. The seventh technique is based on the Buddhist understanding of the middle way, which teaches us to find balance between extremes. When it comes to anxiety, many of us swing between two extremes. Either we're completely overwhelmed by anxious thoughts and feelings, or we're trying to suppress them entirely. The middle way suggests a third option. We can acknowledge anxiety without being consumed by it. This practice involves what I call the anxiety dialogue. When anxiety arises, instead of fighting it or surrendering to it completely, you're going to have a conversation with it. You might say something like, "Hello, anxiety, I see you're here. What are you trying to tell me? What are you worried about? Then you listen. Really listen to what your anxiety is trying to communicate. Often anxiety is pointing towards something that matters to you, a relationship you care about, a goal that's important to you, a value you want to uphold. Once you understand what your anxiety is trying to protect or achieve, you can thank it for its concern, and then make a conscious choice about how to respond. You might say, "Thank you for caring about my presentation tomorrow. I appreciate that you want me to do well. I'm going to prepare as best I can, and then I'm going to trust that I can handle whatever happens." This transforms anxiety from an enemy that attacks you into an advisor that informs you. The eighth technique comes from the Zen tradition, and it's called just sitting, or shikantaza. This is perhaps the most radical approach to anxiety because it involves doing absolutely nothing about it. You don't try to fix it, change it, understand it, or make it go away. You simply sit with it, the way you might sit with a friend who's going through a difficult time. You don't need to have all the answers or solve all their problems. Your presence is enough. Here's how just sitting works with anxiety. When anxiety arises, you sit down, either on a cushion or in a chair, and you simply be present with whatever is happening in your mind and body. Anxious thoughts come up. Let them be there. Physical sensations of anxiety arise. Allow them to be present. The urge to do something, anything to make it stop. Notice that urge and let it be there too. This practice teaches you one of the most important lessons about anxiety. You can coexist with it. You don't have to like it, but you can share space with it without being overwhelmed by it. It's like having a difficult house guest. You don't have to entertain them or make them comfortable, but you can acknowledge their presence without letting them take over your entire house. The ninth technique is called the practice of imperfect action, and it's based on the Buddhist understanding that attachment to outcomes causes suffering. With anxiety, we often get paralyzed because we're so attached to things going perfectly, to avoiding all possible negative outcomes, to being absolutely certain before we take any action. But life doesn't offer us that kind of certainty, and waiting for it keeps us stuck. The practice of imperfect action involves taking meaningful steps forward even when you're anxious, even when you're not completely ready, even when you can't guarantee the outcome will be what you want. It's about acting from your values and intentions rather than from your fears. Before you take action, you acknowledge your anxiety. I notice I'm anxious about this conversation with my boss. That makes sense because my job is important to me. Then you connect with your deeper intention. My intention is to communicate clearly and advocate for what I need. Then you act from that intention, bringing your anxiety along for the ride. This doesn't mean being reckless or unprepared. It means being willing to move forward even when anxiety is present, because waiting for anxiety to completely disappear before you take action is like waiting for the ocean to become still before you learn to swim. Anxiety might always be part of your experience, but it doesn't have to be in the driver's seat. The final technique I want to share with you is called refuge practice, and it's about creating a sense of safety and stability that's not dependent on external circumstances. In Buddhist tradition, practitioners take refuge in the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. For our purposes, we're going to create 3 internal refuges that you can access anytime anxiety arises. Your first refuge is your breath. No matter what's happening in your external world or in your mind, your breath is always available to you as a place of stability and presence. Your second refuge is your compassionate heart. Even when your mind is spinning with anxious thoughts, you can always return to self-compassion, to treating yourself with the same kindness you would offer a good friend. Your third refuge is your wise awareness. This is the part of you that can observe your thoughts and feelings without being swept away by them. The part of you that knows you are more than your anxiety. When anxiety hits, you can take refuge by saying to yourself, I take refuge in my breath, which connects me to this present moment. I take refuge in my compassionate heart, which offers kindness to all of my experiences. I take refuge in my wise awareness, which can hold space for everything that arises without being overwhelmed. These refuges are always available to you. You don't need special circumstances or perfect conditions to access them. They're like an internal sanctuary that you carry with you wherever you go, a place of peace and stability that no external situation can take away from you. Here's what I want you to understand. Anxiety isn't your enemy. It's not evidence that you're broken or weak or doing something wrong. It's part of being human, part of having a mind that cares about outcomes, part of having a heart that's invested in life. The goal isn't to never feel anxious again. The goal is to change your relationship with anxiety so that it can inform you without controlling you, so that it can motivate you without paralyzing you. These mindful techniques I've shared with you aren't just strategies to manage anxiety. They're invitations to a different way of being with your whole experience, a way of meeting whatever arises in your mind and body with curiosity, kindness, and wisdom. They're practices that can transform not just how you relate to anxiety, but how you relate to all of life's challenges and difficulties. Remember, the Buddha himself struggled with difficult mental states before his awakening. The path to freedom doesn't involve never experiencing difficulty. It involves learning to respond to difficulty with wisdom and compassion. Your anxiety might have brought you here today, but it doesn't have to define your tomorrow. With these practices, with patience and consistency, with kindness toward yourself, you can learn to find peace not by eliminating all sources of stress and worry, but by discovering the unshakable calm that exists at the center of your being, no matter what storms might be passing through your mind. The journey from anxiety to freedom isn't about reaching a destination where anxiety never visits. It's about becoming someone who can welcome any guest, even difficult ones like anxiety, with grace, wisdom, and an open heart. And that person, that wise, compassionate, resilient person, they're already there inside you, waiting to be discovered.